Hello everyone. So in this video, let me share 14 skills that you need to have if you want to become a really good technical Jira consultant. The first skill I have is system administration. Now I think system administration is very important, especially the Linux system administration, because if you are someone who is taking care of Jira instance on-prem, then you would need to install Jira, you would need to upgrade Jira, you would need to do some testing on the server. And even if you are not doing something on the server, to be honest, if I talk about myself, I don't really log into the server almost every day. It is on those rare occasions, or maybe once in a while, when we have to do some maintenance, when we have to apply some patches, for example. Of course, we need to do that on a regular basis, but it is not something that we do every day. But if you are someone with a really good Linux system administration background, then it will definitely help you. And it is not just about upgrades. You may or may not be working on Jira Data Center. Let us say you're working on Jira Cloud. Even on Jira Cloud, yes, if you're using Jira Cloud, you won't be doing any upgrades because that is not required. But if you are someone who is taking care of other tools in your organization, if you are someone who is trying to link or integrate Jira with some other tools, then these skills will always help you, right? So this is my number one skill in my list. And I mentioned Linux here, but you also need to consider Windows. Yes, majority of servers are on Linux, but there could be a Windows-based server as well, right? So if you have Linux admin skills and some idea of Windows system administration, then I think you'll be fine. The next skill I have for you is very important. I think this one is something that you cannot ignore, and that is REST API concepts. And I'm not talking about REST API of Jira. I'm just talking about REST API concepts in general. So number one, you should know what REST API is. You should know how to authenticate. You should know how REST API works. You should be familiar with the concepts of how to make a call, how to make a get call or a post call or an update call, and how to get data back from that call, and how to pass the JSON. You can use any language that you want, and we'll talk about the languages, but REST API concepts you need to have. You cannot ignore it. It is absolutely important, right? And the third skill I have for you is Jira REST API. So yes, we talked about REST API concepts. You need to know about those concepts, but when it comes to doing something with Jira, then, and I'm talking about programmatically, maybe remotely, then you need to know how Jira REST API works. Of course, learn about various endpoints, common endpoints, like how to create an issue, how to update an issue, how to add a comment, how to add a work log, how to transition an issue. And of course, I'm talking about the user part of it, but you can also do some admin part, like you can maybe do some configurations using REST API. And if you want to learn these things on my channel, if you go to Ravi Sagar YouTube channel, or you can go to ravisagar.in. I do have plenty of videos, in fact, the entire course where I'm talking about Jira REST API. And the fourth one is REST API, but not for Jira, but for common tools used in the industry. So I'm talking about tools like SharePoint. I'm talking about Google, right? So you might be asked to do some integration between Jira and SharePoint, or maybe Google Drive, like pulling something from Jira and dumping it in a Google Sheet. And I'll talk about Google Sheets later on. But if you have, number one, good idea of REST API concepts, if you know how Jira REST API works, you have some experience, then the next thing to do is to ensure that you also know about these other tools. You do not really need to go into the details, as long as you know how SharePoint, like Microsoft Graph API works, if you know how Google API work, if you know how to interact with Slack, for example. Maybe a very good example could be to integrate Jira with ServiceNow, right? So these tools, again, I'm just giving you some pointers, but based on your industry, based on where you work, I'm sure you have similar tools. Maybe you want to do some custom integration between Jira and maybe your teams, right? Yes, there are plugins and connectors available, but if you have that basic fundamental knowledge of interacting with these tools programmatically using REST API, then you can do a lot of wonderful things and you can actually solve problems. And I'll talk about solving problems as well. The next one in the list, the fifth skill, is having a very good knowledge. And when I say good, I actually mean good knowledge of Excel and Google spreadsheet. Now, I can tell you from my experience working in the industry for so many years, more than 2 decades, close to 25 years, Excel is one such tool which has been there always. Irrespective of the industry, you will find Excel. And Google Spreadsheet is, of course, very popular. Google Spreadsheet, of course, came out much later. But if you're working in a bank, for example, I have not seen a bank where they manage work without Excel. It is absolutely important to master Excel. And I'm not really saying just know basics. You need to know a lot about Excel. And I'm saying this because if you are someone who is interacting with users and you're basically working with stakeholders, program managers, project managers, you will always find Excel sheets in your emails or on SharePoint, and people will ask you to do something with Excel. Maybe they will ask you to import something from Excel to Jira or vice versa. They will fall back to Excel. So Excel is one such tool which is hard to ignore, and you cannot ignore it. If you know Excel, if you know Google Spreadsheets, you can actually do a lot of these things like processing of your issues. You can create some quick reports. You can basically import data from Jira and you can dump it in Excel, and you can probably create some pivot charts, and you can configure this and make a tool where you can give it to someone, your customers, your clients, and they can just build their own reports or look at those reports that you build for them. And if you know how Excel works, or if you know how Google spreadsheets work, then you can actually solve a lot of problems. And again, it is based on my experience. The sixth skill is having a decent, I'm saying decent here, not really good or excellent, a decent understanding of other popular reporting tools. And I can tell you a couple of those tools. Number one is, of course, Power BI. Apart from Excel, of course, you can create reports in Excel, but I wanted to highlight Excel separately and Google Spreadsheet separately. But when it comes to reporting tools outside Jira, Power BI and Tableau is, of course, one very popular, these two are like very popular tools used in the industry, widely used. Power BI is, of course, the Microsoft family. So if you want to learn something outside Jira, then especially focusing on reporting, then Power BI and Tableau is my recommendation. Of course, there are other tools, but I think if you know how to do stuff on these tools, you are basically giving yourself a skill that will help you solve problems within Jira and outside Jira as well. And when you're working with your customers and clients in any organization, you can't just tell them, okay, we don't have this app, we can't solve your problem, we can't help you. Go figure it out yourself. You basically, as a consultant, you have to think outside Jira, because your job is not only to create workflows and configurations in Jira. Your job as a consultant, as a good technical consultant, is to solve problems, right? The seventh skill is basically a combination of different apps. So I'm talking about Jira apps. And by the way, I'm sure you have noticed that I have not mentioned Jira yet in my list, and I'll come to that. So we all know about apps in Jira. You can actually solve a lot of problems. You can actually add a lot of functionality to your Jira by using these apps. And I have a list of few apps that I use regularly, and I'll give you the list. The first one is Script Runner. The second one is EasyBI. And to be honest, 90% of the cases, I'm basically fine with these two apps. The third one is Zephyr, right, for test management. Tempo for timesheets, and a couple of other apps from Tempo Planner, Tempo timesheets. And the fifth one is Structure. We also have other apps, but these are, the top 5 apps, I would say, that you need to master. If you are a Jira admin and if you're trying to get into consultation, I think mastering these 4 apps should be your immediate goal from day one when you start, learning Jira. Always keep these apps in your mind. The eighth skill I have in my list is shell scripting. Now, this is a bit similar to what I talked about system admin, but system admin is all about system administration. Shell scripting on its own is very useful. And I talked about, of course, REST API. I talked about, integrating Jira with other tools using, REST API. But if you know shell scripting, then of course, you can do something on a server on a regular basis. Maybe you want to write a script that will fetch data from Jira every day, and it will push it to some other tool. I remember once I worked for a client where they wanted to pull issues from Jira, dump it in a JSON file, yes, JSON file, and then transfer it to some other server. So the requirement was to basically integrate Jira with some other tool. It was not like a bi-directional, or there was no sync at all. Or there was a sync, but it was like a one-way sync, and it was more about just sending information from one tool to another tool. And of course, there are multiple ways of doing it, but if you know shell scripting, then you can always go to any server. You can spin up a machine, you can write a shell script, and you can do something where it will pull data from Jira and it will dump it somewhere. And that is why I always say that you should know system admin skills. For example, if you don't know system admin skills, if you're not comfortable with Linux, then it will be a bit hard. You will basically, raise your hands. Okay, I can't do it. Leave it, leave me alone. I can't help you. Basically, again, going back to the original goal or the theme of this video, we're talking about how to become an ultimate Jira consultant, right? That you should be that guy who can do anything, right? So that is what I'm talking about. So if you know shell scripting, it will give you a lot of power. And by the way, shell scripting is, people don't talk about shell scripting, but shell scripting, or I should say Linux servers, basically everything runs on it. We don't realize it, we don't talk about it, but this is how things work. This is how cloud work, right? Okay, let us move on. So the ninth skill I have is Groovy. Now, yes, I talked about script runner, and I'm talking about Groovy here. I know Groovy is one such language which is not too different from Java, but if you really know Groovy, then of course you can do a lot of wonderful things on Jira Data Center. Even on Jira Cloud, we have a script runner for Jira that uses REST API, but it also uses Groovy. But if you know Groovy, I think at least for the next few years, or as long as we have Jira Data Center, I think we will have a script runner. And when we have script runner, then we will be using Groovy. So Groovy definitely is a must-have right now, right? You need to know how Groovy works. And when it comes to Groovy, yes, I'm talking about a programming language. So you should have some technical background. You should have programming background. If you don't really know how to code, then of course it will be a bit difficult. But again, we are talking about a technical skill here, right? We are not talking about like business skills. So yeah, Groovy is definitely one important language. The 10th skill that I have in my list is other programming languages. And when we talk about other programming languages, I have few in my list based on, again, my experience. So the first one I have is Python. So if you remember, I talked about shell scripting. Now, shell scripting is great, where you can run a script on a server and you can add it to a cron and it will run every day. But shell scripting has some limitations. Shell scripting is not like a proper programming language. You can't really do all those wonderful things that you can do in a typical programming language. Shell scripting is more about doing things in sequence. And yes, you can do things like you can use a JQ. JQ is one utility where you can parse your JSON, but there is a limitation of what you can do with shell scripting. And shell scripting is, of course, a bit not readable. So you would often need a proper programming language. So Python is one such language, which is, of course, very popular. And Python is, of course, lightweight. So you can, let us not talk about lightweight or heavyweight, but Python is easy to learn. So I think you should know a little bit of Python, right? Little bit. The next one I have in my list is VBA. Now, I talked about Excel and I talked about mastering Excel. Excel is not about, just knowing formulas and creating filters and sorting your sheet. Excel is much more than that. Excel is actually a very popular tool and powerful tool. And it is popular for a variety of reasons. But if you want to take your skills to the next level, you need to know how to write code, how to do some automation, and you can do that using VBA, right? And when you know VBA, you can actually do things like pulling data from Jira and then processing it. Maybe you want to transform it, and then maybe you want to send somewhere else. Maybe you want to just dump it in a sheet where it will be picked up by a pivot table, for example. So Excel with VBA is important. Again, based on my experience, because I do these things regularly. The next one is similar to VBA, but not VBA, but I have it in my list, which is Google App Script. Now, Google App Script, I would say it is a bit like, it's not too different from JavaScript, but of course it is based on what you do with Google tools like Google Spreadsheet. So whatever I talked about VBA and Excel, for doing the same thing for Google Spreadsheet, you need to know Google App Script. And the fourth one I have in my list is JavaScript. And the last one is React. So React, I'm talking about JavaScript and React here because nowadays when we talk about Forge, we're all talking about Node.js and we're all talking about React because that is how you develop apps for Forge. And as clients, my clients and companies will move towards cloud, we need to, of course, start building those automations or rebuilding those automations from script runner to Forge-based automations. And if you don't know script runner, if you don't know Groovy, then it will be difficult. Even if you are doing some migration, or if you are responsible for moving those automations from data center to cloud, you need to know how the current script which is written in Groovy works. And for that, you need to know, of course, Groovy. But for doing the same thing using Forge, you need to know JavaScript, Node.js, and React. And that is why I have listed it in my list of skills. The 11th skill is something that we don't really talk about a lot, and that is HTML. Yes, I've seen people where they don't even know how to create a simple, hyperlink. They don't know how HTML works, which I understand, but I think it is important. If you know how HTML works, and then going back to the concept of Node.js, because Forge-based apps, when you work on those apps, you're basically creating a web app that works on a browser, right? So you have to, of course, know, you need to know HTML. And I think HTML is one such skill which we don't talk about anymore. I don't know why. So you need to know HTML. And if you're someone who's new, don't ignore HTML, right? The 12th skill I have in my list is probably not the most important one. I'm joking. It is basically the Jira administration skills. So we are talking about, of course, becoming a Jira consultant, becoming a Jira technical consultant, ultimate Jira consultant to be precise. And of course, you need to know Jira administration for both data center and cloud. And if you are not doing anything on data center, maybe you can ignore it, but data center is still here. And we were initially thinking that data center will go away. It is still here. I don't know what will happen to data center, but as long as it is here, we need to know how data center works. And especially if you are doing migrations, then you definitely need to know what things, how things are different on Jira Data Center, right? So Jira administration, expert level skills for both cloud and data center. This is basically my 12th skill. The skill number 13 is about communication skills. Now we're talking about becoming a consultant, and so far I'm talking about technical skills. But I think if you're going to talk to people, if you're going to capture their requirements, if you're going to understand their challenges, you need to basically talk to them. You need to understand how they work. You need to communicate with them. So I think having good communication skills, good listening skills is extremely important, right? And I will probably make more videos on this. Like I think on my channel, I have a playlist where I talk about consultation, Jira consultation in general. But I think communication skills is extremely important, like very important. You may be a very good consultant in terms of like technical consultant when we talk about these skills, but if you don't know how to capture requirements, if you don't know how to effectively communicate with your stakeholders, clients, then all of this will not work, right? So this is very important. And the last skill I have in my list, skill number 14, is problem solving mindset. We don't really think about it a lot, but I think all of this, that we're talking about And if we talk about becoming a consultant in any field, I think end of the day we are just solving problems. We try to understand what challenges people face when they use tools like Jira, and also beyond Jira, right? So you should have that mindset. And I've given you these examples where I talked about knowing other tools like SharePoint or Excel or integrating with ServiceNow. So basically, your goal should be to help others. Your goal should be to help others by understanding their problems and coming up with solutions that will work for them or they're comfortable with. So you can have always more than one or multiple solutions, but you have to basically work with your clients, work with your stakeholders, and understand what works for them, what exactly they are looking for. And you can do all of that only when you have that mindset to solve a problem, right? So this is, I think, very important. And of course, I talked about 14 skills, but I'm sure there are many more. But I just wanted to give you a list of 14 to begin with. And I guarantee if you do all of this, right? Of course, we are not talking about to what extent you need to learn these skills, but if you know at least half of these skills, then I think you can be a really good, if not ultimate, Jira consultant. But of course, no. I'm just giving you some ideas and pointers, and this is to just help you. So what I'm talking about in this video is common things or skills that will help you in the industry. And end of the day, you're going to work for a client. You'll be working for a company. You'll be working for your organization. Maybe you are already working somewhere, or maybe you want to switch your job. I think if you know these skills, then you will be able to not only get a job easily, or maybe to get promotion, or maybe to get some good points, right? But you are actually making sure that your career is long lasting, right? If you are someone in that company where you just know a couple of things and you can be easily replaced, then you will be replaced. But if you know these other things, some of that we covered in this video, I think it will really help you. So you should be that person. If someone comes to you with a problem, they can expect a solution, right? All right, so I hope I've given you some ideas and clues in this video, and I hope you learned and you enjoyed watching this video. Thank you very much.